Hello and welcome to the Play Review with me, Douglas Schatz.
And me, Jodi Rylett.
Hi, Jodi. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you, Douglas. How are you?
I'm very well. It's great to be back for a new year of theatre.
It is indeed. I finally saw my first show. What was it? Oh, 8 days into the new year before I saw my first show.
That's pretty good. I think I saw 80 shows last year.
Wow. Goodness me. That is impressive.
And there were some great ones. It was a great year. Anyway, we start this year with the National Theatre's new production of The Importance of Being Earnest, which I saw before Christmas and you saw just yesterday. The show is directed by Max Webster and stars Ncuti Gatwa, who many will know as the current Doctor Who. That casting alone should be enough to tell you that this is not likely to be a traditional take on Wilde's drawing room classic, and so it proves. It's a fabulously out there, unapologetically camp, self-consciously theatrical rendition that some purists may think is over the top. The tone being set by the curtain rising to reveal Ncuti dressed in a neon pink gown playing a grand piano surrounded by an orgy of men in black tie and drag. So, Jodi, what did you make of this bold interpretation? Too much or a breath of fresh air?
It was everything. I loved it. I really did. It was a lot for sure. I was so lucky. I got a last minute return on a Wednesday afternoon when a meeting got cancelled. I thought I'd chance my arm. And what a spectacular way to spend the afternoon. My face was just aching from grinning.
That's brilliant. I mean, what's interesting for all its campness and contemporary resonances, it managed to be faithful, I think, to Wilde's original text. Actually, it's not a completely rewritten adaptation. He just makes it feel modern.
Yeah, the language, the beautiful phrasing, the mannered nature of the language, it's all still there. I mean, you can't play this thing seriously. It's an utterly ridiculous story. The whole thing is preposterous, right?
Yeah.
And so for all it is farcical, it never descended into sort of slapstick or too much farce. It was just the right amount of humor, I thought.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably clever script, obviously famous for the effervescence of its wit and language, as you say, but also it's really beautifully structured, very funny, of course. There's a whole lot of social satire going on, but what was really interesting about this production is that it forefronts the queerness in the play. And it's very overt in this production, but as Max Webster, who directed it and who I had the privilege to talk to in my most recent episode of the Play podcast, he points out that it's all there in the subtext of the original play. In the double lives the men lead, Algernon is bunburying all over the country, and Jack pretending to be his wicked brother Ernest so he can amuse himself in town. So they're living these double lives, and there are all sorts of coded gay signals that Max pointed to in the play that Wilde deliberately included. What Wilde had to hide, this production celebrates, and it felt absolutely right for our times.
Yeah, I agree. That whole idea of code switching as well, the face that you put on for your family and for the role that you are cast as this member of the family is different to the face that you put on for your friends, is different to the face that you might put on social media, etc. I thought it played all of that really beautifully and is very relevant for today, but without losing the fact that it was having a lot of fun with Victorian manners and mores and rules as well. I really enjoyed how much food came into play. How the structure and the rigor of tea and sandwiches and luncheon and garden parties and so on. It was very funny.
All of that is, of course, part of the social satire as well, as Max pointed out, too. I mean, part of the satire is that the Victorians took all those things too seriously.
Yes.
They argue about whether cake or bread and butter is in fashion. But I agree with you, the gender fluidity was fascinating as well. There's clearly suggestions on the part of both the men and the women. And there's a not so subtle
moments
frisson between the women,
exactly.
Which Max even admitted is not necessarily as evident in the original. But I really thought that added to this sense of gender fluidity, of course, and that identity can be fluid as well. And identity is a performance too, which, as you say, speaks very much to our social media age.
Yes, absolutely.
But also I thought that, the sexual undercurrents, not just between the women, but on the part of the women, was also very telling because it positively promoted the idea that the women are equally entitled to their independent desires. And the women in the play are very much in charge. And I thought that balanced the scales between the men and the women very well.
Yeah, it did definitely. And they played it exceptionally well. Each person had a lot of fun with the role that they had and had their part of the story to drive forward as well. So I hadn't really appreciated how well balanced it is as a play. It's not all, although Ncuti Gatwa is the big star, he doesn't have 90% of the lines. It's an ensemble piece in that way.
Absolutely right. And in fact, we can talk about the cast and their performance. I mean, Ncuti looks great. I mean, the whole thing is just ravishing to look at, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, he is such a beautiful man in that pink dress, that Marilyn Monroe style, diamonds are a girl's best friend dress, and with a Madonna take with its little bodice underneath it, the corset. I mean, utterly spectacular. When the curtain went up, I was like, what am I looking at here? What is going on?
Yes, many will have thought that.
Straight away. I mean, you knew from the promotion posters you were in for something different, but it's so bold. I so admire when directors do this, and yet they do it and it's still in service of the story.
Yeah, that very much struck me in my conversation with Max, how thoughtful he was about the original and that this does work in that way. Sometimes the director does too much at the expense of a play, but I don't think that happens in this case. And going back to what it looks like, the costumes are absolutely magnificent. You just say Ncuti's gown, but he looks great in suits to die for.
I mean, everything, the beautiful shirts that were really blouses in a see-through kind of organza. So feminine and masculine. They were just gorgeous. I just wanted to touch every outfit and sometimes just pause it so I could just take a proper look at everything.
I loved overall the look. I mean, the fantastic range of vibrant, bright color in the women's gowns, for example.
So I was just going to say also, I was really struck by how beautifully the colours worked with the vibrant colours of the furniture on the set as well. So where they sat was important because that beautiful pink of that dress that offset perfectly with just that shade of orange on that particular chair. It was beautiful. I loved it.
And of course, all of it plays triumphantly to Wilde's motto that style rather than sincerity is paramount, as Gwendolyn says. And we can't not mention the curtain call, which is without doubt the craziest curtain call I have ever seen. I know this is jumping to the end, and I won't spoil it by saying anything more. I don't think I could properly describe it anyway, but it is worth witnessing, is it not?
It definitely is. And again, it was another one of those moments where for a second or two, I was really thrown. What is happening now?
Yes.
I thought it was done.
Yes, it's not done. Stay for that ending, people. I also, just by the way, this is completely apropos nothing. I love all the pink merchandise the National Theatre has created around this show.
Oh, yeah, it was really smart. And I think Ray Smith's set and costume design was, in a way, the star of this show because the London apartment, I could envisage the sort of Palladian London house that would be. And then the curtain went up in that huge country house with the two staircases and the books going up to the ceiling. It was so grand. I mean, this is our National Theatre. It should have these impressive sets for this huge show. That was utterly gorgeous.
Yeah, they can do it, certainly.
Yeah, and the fun that they had when they were outside in the gardens with the banked grassy hill and the physical comedy that afforded of people occasionally sort of tumbling down them and hiding behind the bushes or getting tangled in them. That also worked brilliantly well.
Yeah, I thought that was a little obvious myself, but I take your point. But going back to the performances, so Ncuti, I thought he's perfectly cast. He's got this wonderful flamboyance. He's made to be a camp performative character, which is very much a statement of principle by Wilde about how to live an uninhibited life. And you talked about the food. I loved the scene with him and Hugh Skinner as Jack sitting on the bench in front of the curtain, eating muffins and squabbling in a completely childish but wonderfully witty and warm way. It was Wilde repartee at its best. That was just joyous.
It really was. And unashamedly covering the scene change as well. I loved how it was sort of knowing, like nobody was within any doubt at all that we are seeing a performance here. And again, that wasn't just isn't it fun to occasionally break the fourth wall? It serves the purpose of this story about performance being how we live.
Yeah, exactly. I really love the knowingness of it, which is signaled even before it starts, because the stage is framed by a gilded proscenium arch and a spotlight shines on a gold handbag hanging in front of the plush red curtain. It's obviously a specific nod to our familiarity with the play. We all know about the handbag, and therefore what we're about to watch cannot be anything other than hyper theatrical.
Yeah. And just on Nchuti's performance as well, what a gorgeous voice he has. The clarity with which he speaks without it ever being forced or mannered. He has just a beautiful voice for theatre. He's an incredible performer.
Yeah, he's very charismatic, isn't he? I thought, if anything, actually, Hugh Skinner was certainly a match, if not better, in some ways. He's a great foil to Algernon. And while he does this standard kind of outraged straight man, I mean straight as in the put upon half of the comic double act, he also gives Jack some, I thought, a little bit of emotional reality, even as the whole thing is complete nonsense, as he often says.
Yeah, I agree. He had those little moments of vulnerability and utter confusion when he would occasionally just blow his top and then immediately be mortified that he'd done so. I think he's great in this part. His physicality is amazing as well.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And you mentioned about voice, Sharon D. Clarke as Lady Bracknell. She has a lovely voice too, so wonderfully rich, and she commands the stage. And it's a very interesting casting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And again, underscored with the costumes, her Ghanaian colours in the flamboyance of the dress were just spectacularly done.
Yeah, she plays this kind of Caribbean matriarch, which worked really beautifully, I thought, with the modern day kind of multicultural world we're witnessing. And it added an extra layer, I think, to Lady Bracknell's put on airs and graces, because the text tells us that she came from nowhere when she married Lloyd Bracknell.
Yes, I thought that made it work even better, actually. That was really smart.
What about the two women, Gwendolyn and Cecily?
I really enjoyed both of their performances. I thought at first that Gwendolyn was going to jar a little bit and get on my nerves, but she didn't.
Ronke Adekoleo.
Yes, because she has a way every now and again of dropping into a lower register for certain words. And I thought, oh, please don't overdo that. That's going to really jar. And actually, I just enjoyed it.
She was also, I thought, a very feisty and sexy and modern presence on the stage. And Eliza Scanlon, who plays Cecily, it's a slightly thankless part, I have to say. Many, many years ago, a girlfriend played that part, and I had to help her learn lines, so I know every single line of that part. The scene where she relays her diary entries is brilliantly done.
It is brilliantly done. And the scene with the cake and the sugar lumps in the tea, I mean, how much passive aggression can one person convey through the delivery of a sugar lump?
It's predictable, but classically effective comedy, that, isn't it?
Yes.
And the women give as good as they get with the men, which is part of the point of the play, I think, as well. Also, just in passing, I thought Julianne Bleach, who doubled as the manservants, nearly stole his scene.
He really did.
As Lane, Algernon's servant in the first act, he has this wonderful world weariness. He's seen it all go on in LG's hijinks.
Yes, it was very Jeeves and Wooster. He opens the show really after the camp nightclub scene, trying to tidy up after whatever night's debauchery has gone on before. And he does it with such a world weariness.
Drinking the remaining drinks.
Drinking what's left of the decent champagne, because of course the bachelors have the best champagne.
And then he does Merry Man, Jack's servant in the country. And he does that classic comic act of being too old for the comings and goings in the house. It's just whirling around him. So, did you have any reservations about the show?
I didn't. I thought it was beautifully executed. It was exactly what it should be around Christmas time as well, to bring that joy and light and energy.
The only thing I thought was that in the last act, the final sorting out of the business of Jack's identity and the couplings dragged on a bit. That could be as much to do with Wilde as it is to do with the production. But there's this moment, for example, where Jack goes off stage and is banging around in the attic to find the handbag, leaving not much happening on stage. The problem is we all know the result by this point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to sustain that suspense. And I've sort of felt like, let's just get to the end here. But that may be nitpicking.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I think if it hadn't have had the payoff with the way that the handbag emerged.
Yes. Then they raise the energy again in the finale. Jack jumps up on the table and it's fantastic declaration.
Yes.
So, as you say, it's very seasonal. It seemed appropriate. Some critics have talked about it being a bit like a pantomime, and it sort of is, but it's much more than that. As Wilde described it, a trivial comedy for serious people. So there's a lot more going on there than there might be in pantomime.
Yeah, and I think I did see pantomime costuming in, Lady Bracknell's huge hats and her huge Ghanaian headdress definitely had the smack of a pantomime dame, potentially. I tell you who we haven't mentioned is Miss Prism, Amanda Lawrence. Her kind of nervous wreck, austere governess with the suppressed passion for the vicar.
Yeah.
That was also really, really well played. And again, could be another very dull part to play, but
Yeah, I'm never as interested in those two, really. I always think it's a bit of a sideline, but I grant you that.
they did a lot with it.
Finally, I would say that one of the funny coincidences is that after I'd seen this, I actually caught, just by accident, the ending of the 2002, I think it is, film version of this play with Colin Firth, Rupert Everett, Judi Dench, etc.
Oh, what casting.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it all looked ludicrously stale by comparison to what we see on the National Theatre stage.
I'm sure. So if you're going to revive something like this, do it well.
Go for it.
Go for it. Commit. Remember that the story is still what matters and the themes that mattered then matter now. Otherwise, why revive it?
Absolutely. I think the thing that I most take away from it is the sexual politics and how what was subversive becomes overt. And I think it's a really important one. And I think the joy of it and that leads me to think that Wilde would have absolutely loved this version and the world that can accommodate this version.
Yeah, agreed.
So I think we're encouraging you to go and try and see The Importance of Being Earnest before it closes on the 25th of January. I know that tickets may be hard to come by, but that you, Jodi, and my daughter also managed to grab a return at short notice, so it's very much worth trying. Thanks very much, Jodi. Great to see you. Let's do it again very soon.
Yes, definitely. Looking forward to it. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye. We'd love to hear what you think, so please visit theplaypodcast.com to share your comments or email us at plays@theplaypodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.